Hello, hello, everybody. Chelsea here. Welcome to today's episode of the Love Over Fear Show. I am really excited for today's episode, which is called The Mind, the Meaning Making Machine. Okay, this is going to be a good one. This is going to be a good one. I truly feel that way about every episode, and I think I just get more and more excited with each episode. But I chose this topic because in doing this work for a while now with those who experience anxiety and relationship anxiety, I have noticed quite the strong pattern of meaning making. Everything has to mean something. If I feel this way, what does that mean? If I don't feel this way, what does that mean? If I have this thought, what does that mean? If I do this thing, what does that mean? And if anyone is with me live, you know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? Meaning making is, it's a thing. When we experience anxiety, it's the brain is constantly searching for, oh, what does that mean? What does that mean? Oh my gosh, what does that mean? What does it mean that I don't feel anything? What does it mean that da, 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 da? It's constantly making meaning, making a story out of everything. Everything. So I want to tackle this thing and help you to understand why the mind does this and to help you begin to separate yourself from the constant meaning making of the mind, because it could be constant. It could be constant. So are we ready to dive into today's episode? And if you're with me live, I see some people watching, say hi, connect with me, and let me know if you're ready to dive in to really understand this mechanism of the mind, making meaning out of everything. All right, let's dive in. Okay, so here's the thing. Meaning making is a normal function of the brain that allows us to make sense of things, see patterns. Think about like the weather. Okay, we have this dark, I don't know the names of types of clouds, any cloud people out there. We have this dark, big cloud, and I'm hearing some thunder. That means it's probably going to rain, right? So meaning making allows us to see patterns. It's what makes us human. It's what separates us from animals. So meaning making in itself isn't a problem. It's not like we have to get rid of all meaning making. It's how we solve problems, solve equations, get really good at something because we see a pattern and we form data and meaning from these patterns. But here's when it becomes a problem. Let's identify, when does meaning making, which is a normal function of the human brain, when does it become a problem? Okay. And the first thing is, we can have too much of a good thing. And here's what I mean. Take, for example, the fact that our cells divide. Our cells in our body are dividing. But when that happens too much and the cells are dividing at a rapid speed, that's a part of cancer. Your immune system attacking things, that's a good thing. But when your immune system attacks everything and starts attacking itself, you get an autoimmune disorder. So it's something that our brain does, but when it happens too much about anything and everything, it becomes like a sickness, like a disease. It starts to attack its own self, right? If the immune system starts attacking itself, it becomes a problem. If meaning making starts meaning making about everything about you, everything that you experience, it becomes a problem. So when there is too much meaning making and it starts to feel like it's becoming a problem in your life, it's impacting how you see yourself, how you see the world, how you see the relationship, impacting it in a way that makes it difficult to be present and difficult to even function sometimes, because everything has a meaning, everything has a story. Oh my God, I can't go anywhere without, what does that mean? Oh my God, is that a sign? What does that mean? Right? That's when it tips from, oh, our brain just likes to look for patterns and meaning, to this is becoming a problem. This is becoming a problem. And if you're with me live, say hi, don't be shy. And here's the next way that we can begin to see when meaning making has become a problem. Okay? So if meaning making is a normal function of the brain and it's what humans do to see patterns and to learn things, which is really serves us. So meaning making becomes a problem when, rather than it serving you and you choosing to use it, you serve it and it chooses when to use you. I'm going to say that again. Rather than meaning making serving you and you choosing when to use it, you serve the meaning making and it chooses when to use you. You feel that shift in dynamic. Instead of, I'm going to use my meaning making skills to understand this or see this problem or look for patterns, I'm choosing to use it. It is serving me. It is helping me. It becomes a problem when you serve it and it chooses when to use you. You no longer feel like you have a choice or a say. Everywhere you look, oh, the meaning making's there. Oh God, oh, what does that mean? Oh no. It seems stronger than you. It has a very powerful pull. Is that happening for you? Is the meaning making beginning to feel like it's consuming you and it's using you and you're serving it and you're at its mercy of, oh God, what does this mean? What does this mean? Yeah, sit with that one. That's a heavy one. That's a heavy one. So let's look at this even deeper. The mind is made up of our conditioning, and it creates meaning and stories based on this conditioning. And what is conditioning? What is the conditioning made up of? Conditioning is made up of our past experiences in our life and cultural narratives. So like the collective mind, what we're constantly hearing and seeing in our culture, in media. So conditioning is made up of our past experiences and cultural narratives. So it's almost like the mind is really like a collective mind, the collective mind of cultures or subsets of cultures. So since the mind is really made up of conditioning, it only is going to keep seeing things through the lens of the past experiences, what I know, what I've seen, and through the lens of what I'm constantly seeing and hearing in culture, for better, for worse. So since the mind is made up of conditioning, when the mind makes meaning, here's what it's doing. The meaning making in this way, through this conditioning, is really imposing a story based on the past, based on what you're constantly seeing and hearing. It's imposing a story or a judgment based on this conditioning on the isness of something. Okay, I'm going to say that again. Meaning making in this way is imposing a story or a judgment on the isness of something. If you have a certain feeling, that just is. If something happens, that just is. If you have a thought, that just is. It just is. It's just what you're experiencing in the present moment. But the mind can only see and make meaning through the lens of its conditioning. So it's going to see that thing that just happened in the moment through the lens of this conditioning and impose this whole story, this whole narrative, this whole judgment onto the isness of that thing that just happened in the present moment. You following me? This is some pretty intense stuff. And when this happens, when the mind interprets something through this conditioning, it makes whatever just happened something that it's not. When we are making meaning based on our cultural conditioning and our past experiences, we often make something, we make it something that it's not, because we've imposed this story on it. We've imposed this judgment based on all this other stuff onto what we just experienced, and we then make it something that it's not. Reality becomes distorted because it's not based in reality, the isness of what just happened in the present moment. It's based in conditioning. The meaning making is not based in reality. It's based in conditioning. Okay, we're going to sit with that. Whoa. All the stories that my mind creates about every little thing that happens, every little thing I see, it's not based in reality because the present moment is the only reality. It's based in my conditioning, which is the accumulation of my past experiences and the cultural narratives that I've internalized. We are really pulling back the curtain on this tactic of the mind and seeing it for what it is. Let's take an example. Let's take an example, okay? I'm going to go there. Right now in our culture, something that we are constantly hearing about is that one virus, okay? And when this all first came out and this all first was really intense, you know, this was something I was constantly being bombarded with. And so one day when I was cleaning my house, I noticed I had a little bit of a tickle in my throat. The tickle in my throat, that was an is, okay? I have a tickle in my throat, okay? But based on the cultural narrative that was swirling through my mind, I saw that tickle in my throat through that lens, and I was like, oh my God, I have that virus. And you know what I did? I went to Google and I went, oh my gosh, tickle in throat, that virus. You see? And guess what? I had a tickle in my throat because I was dusting. That was the reality. I was dusting. The fan blades, they get real dusty. And so I have a little bit of an allergy to dust. And instead of my mind being like, oh, I'm dusting, I'm a little bit allergic to dust, based in reality, oh, no, my mind took the constant cultural narrative, oh, this virus, and interpreted that one little sensation through that lens and made it mean that I had that virus. And we can do this with anything. If we have a cultural narrative, oh, love is constant passion, love is constant desire, love is constant romance. If you do, we're getting these cultural narratives, and then we're with our partner and we feel kind of meh, we're going to interpret that just neutrality, that neutral feeling, or that lack of intensity, we're going to interpret what we're experiencing in that moment through the lens of all this cultural conditioning and making it mean something. Because in reality, you're just sitting with your partner, you're feeling neutral, like nothing exciting's happening. Is that actually a problem? It becomes a problem when the mind gets a hold of it. Because the mind is interpreting everything through this lens of cultural conditioning and making it mean something based on the conditioning. You following? I have people watching live. Am I losing you? You following? So, this is happening in the mind. This is just what the mind does. The mind is made up of cultural conditioning. The mind is constantly like interpreting, because that's what it does, but it can go into overdrive and make meaning out of everything. And when we are fully identified with the mind, when we believe, oh my gosh, my thoughts are a reflection of who I am. My thoughts are me. Every thought is real. Every thought is true because I am my mind, and my mind is a reflection of the essence of who I am. Right? That's what it means when we identify with the mind. We derive our sense of who we are by what we think. So when we are fully identified with the mind, meaning making and thinking becomes compulsive. These are the words of Eckhart Tolle. Okay, everybody, if you haven't read this book, I need you to go get it. You can find a free PDF download on the Google. You go, The Power of Now, free PDF download, or you can buy it if you'd like to have the physical copy and underline everything. I like to underline everything. So Eckhart Tolle says when we identify with the mind, meaning we derive our sense of self from all of this mind activity, everything the mind says, everything the mind thinks, thinking and meaning making then becomes compulsive. It's constantly happening. We feel like we have no control over it. It constantly has to be happening. We're constantly feeding into it because the mind is constantly trying to establish its sense of importance and thus your sense of identity. If I am everything that I think, and I don't know who I am without these thoughts, and these thoughts about me, and these thoughts about the world, and these thoughts about my past, and these thoughts about culture, that's me. What I think is who I am. And the mind is constantly trying to keep that intact. The mind is trying to establish its sense of importance by convincing you that you cannot live without it. Let me say that again. The mind is constantly trying to establish its sense of importance by convincing you that you cannot live without the constant meaning making and the constant stream of thoughts. So how does it really pull us in? How does it really convince us? Through fear. Our brains are wired to look for fear because our brains are wired for survival. If our mind is going to establish a sense of importance by thinking fear-based thoughts, because if they're fear-based thoughts and our mind is wired for survival, we are going to pay attention to those thoughts. We're not going to pay attention to a thought that like is just meh. So the mind is going to use these tactics, throwing fear-based thoughts and fear-based meaning making to convince you, oh, you have to keep thinking about this. If you don't think about this, something bad's going to happen. If you don't figure this out right now, if you don't figure out what this means and what you need to do right now, something bad is going to happen. It feeds on that survival instinct. And this is how it continually establishes its sense of importance, which continually reinforces the fact that I am my mind, because I'm never not thinking, and I have to believe it. I have to go down the rabbit hole that it pulls me into, and my mind must be true. Everything I think, this must be true, because it's so convincing. And there it has you. It has convinced you, you need me. You need to keep thinking about this. You need to make meaning out of every little thing, because if you don't, something bad's going to happen. You're not going to be safe. Nicole says, I'm so glad that I've learned that, because just because I think it doesn't mean it's true. Wholly exhausting, right? How exhausting is this cycle to be so fused with the mind that we are fully convinced that we need it to survive, that we need the meaning making, that we need the constant thinking about every little thing, that we need to pick everything apart. The mind creates meaning at rapid speeds. Yeah, it takes attention to undo it. Yeah, and we're going to get into how to slowly begin undoing this. Because if we're so fully identified with the mind, it's going to take conscious practice to begin to separate your identity from it. Because the mind is also afraid. It's like, you need me. And if you're not constantly listening to me, what's going to happen? If you think of like the mind as its like own entity. And that's why the mind is always creating problems through meaning making, right? It's feeding on the fear. If there's a problem, then we think we have to solve it. And then we're going to just keep feeding into it. And then that's where the mind gets its fuel. That's why the mind is always creating problems. Notice how the mind only makes fear-based meaning. It's not like, oh, wow, that must mean I'm a really beautiful person. That must mean the world is a great place. That must mean, oh, my partner loves me so much. Oh, hell no. Notice. We exposing the mind today. And the mind is not going to like that. Notice how the mind only creates problematic meaning. Meaning that creates a problem. Meaning that evokes fear. Because if you think there's a problem, you're going to keep thinking. And then the mind's like, see, you need me. I'm important. All of this thinking, I'm so important. And then you're like, this is who I am. Oh my gosh. This is me, these thoughts. I need to figure this out because this is me. This is true. This is real. And you can see how when we're fully identified with our mind, it's almost like we're living in an alternate reality. I'm being very straightforward because I want you to feel the power of this message. When we are fully identified with our mind and we believe every thought and we are fully convinced, it's like we begin living in an alternate reality. Reality is distorted because we see everything through the lens of the conditioning. Everything through the lens of, oh, it's a problem. I have to pay attention. I have to do something about it. It's a problem. It's a problem. It's a problem. It's a problem. Because without the problems that the mind creates through this meaning making, there would be nothing to think about. And therefore, you wouldn't need the mind. You wouldn't need the constant thinking. You wouldn't need the constant assessing and overanalyzing. And if you could solve these problems that your mind creates through the mind, you would no longer need the mind. But the mind wants to convince you that it is important and that you need it and that you are actually one with it. So therefore, it has to only create problems. The meaning making always has to be rooted in fear to keep your attention, to keep your devotion to it. That's why the mind only creates problems, because without the problems, there would be nothing to think about, nothing to analyze, nothing to figure out. And then you wouldn't need the mind. And the mind, it wants to establish its sense of importance. It wants to convince you, you need me. You need to be thinking about this. If you don't, oh my gosh, you're going to be a terrible person. Something bad's going to happen. You're going to hurt someone. You're going to hurt yourself. What does this mean? Does this mean you're in the wrong relationship? You need to do something right now? The rapid speed, as Sarah says. Rapid. constantly keeping your energy and your attention and your focus, pulling you in, pulling you in. This is the tactic of the mind. These are its characteristics. This is what it does. This is how it works. And if you're fully identified with the mind wants you to believe that you must think and think and think and think and think, because that's all you know of yourself. That's the only way you know how to be and move through the world, is through this lens of the mind, the conditioning. That's the only lens through which we see the world when we are fully identified with the mind, when we believe that our thoughts are reality. Yeah. If you're fully identifying with the mind, thinking and meaning making becomes compulsive. You are no longer thinking the thoughts. The thoughts are thinking you. When you are fully identified with the mind and believe everything that comes through, you are not thinking the thoughts are thinking you. It's a powerful statement. And the more identified you are with the mind, meaning the more you believe every little thought, the more you think it's real, the more you get pulled down the rabbit hole, the more intense your emotional reaction will be to what it says. The more you believe all of the fear-based meaning, the more you go into the rabbit hole, the more you are convinced that you need to keep thinking and finding the meaning to every little thing, the more intense your emotional reaction will be to these thoughts, to the meaning. So that's another thing you can look at. How intense is my emotional reaction to the meaning making? If the meaning making is always creating a problem based in fear, based in cultural conditioning, past experiences, what is my emotional reaction like? Just become curious. We're doing this from a place of curiosity rather than judgment, because guess what? All of our minds do this. This is what the mind does. So freedom is beginning to disidentify from the mind, meaning we no longer fuse our sense of self and who we are and the essence of our life with the mind activity. So, Chelsea, how do I do that? What? How can we break free and disidentify from the mind so that we're not continually swept up in the never-ending meaning making, the fear-based stories, the narratives? Okay, you ready? Let's get into it. Let's get into it. Number one, I have 4 things for you. 4 ways to begin to disidentify from the mind so that it is no longer thinking you. It is no longer using you. You take back the power. You step forward as the leader, not the mind, okay? Number 1, notice the conditioned stories. Notice the conditioning by paying attention to any repetitive thought patterns. Here's what someone said yesterday. I'm afraid that because I keep having the same thoughts, that it must mean they're true. And what I'm saying is we find out what our conditioning is by paying attention to any repetitive thought patterns. So what repetitive thoughts really means is that is your conditioning. That's the conditioning. That's the mind. It's based in past experiences and cultural narratives, things you've picked up along the way. It's not even yours. Repetitive thought patterns, things that we're constantly thinking, actually point us to what our conditioning is. And remember, conditioning is rooted in the past and rooted in culture. It's not rooted in the present moment. And the present moment is the only thing that's real. So when the mind says, oh, because you're thinking repetitive thoughts, that means something's wrong, right? Right there, it created a problem. And when it made it a problem, it kept you hooked. It reestablished its sense of importance. Because it's a problem that you're thinking this over and over and over, you need to keep thinking about it. You need to figure it out. Therefore, you need to use your mind. You need me. Let's make more meaning out of this. And of course, it's problematic meaning, always. And what I'm saying is flipping that script and saying the repetitive thought patterns are just pointing you to the conditioning. And what is the conditioning? The past and cultural narratives. And the mind is always looking to establish and ensure its own survival. So it'll often take what I've experienced in the past and what I've heard from culture and project that into the future to see, am I going to be okay? Is anything bad going to happen? I need to figure this out. So it takes us anywhere but the present moment. And each present moment is new. So if we're thinking the same thoughts and projecting it onto the present moment, right there, that's an indication that this is conditioning. Because each present moment is brand new. How could it be the same? How could it be the same if each moment as it unfolds is brand new? You've never been there before, and yet the mind has already made a story about it, pulling from all these other places. And this story is usually the repetitive story, the same story, because it's based in the past and based in cultural narratives, based in a collective mind. So notice, we can identify, oh, this is the conditioning, by noticing any repetitive thought patterns. Have you been conditioned in your past to believe that you are unworthy? Your thoughts are going to kind of have that theme. I'm going to make a mistake. What if I fail? What if I do the wrong thing? What if they don't love me? What if I, get married and get divorced and then I'm terrible? See the theme here? It's this repetitive thought of, what if I'm doing something wrong? Boom, that is conditioning. That is conditioning. Notice the repetitive thought patterns. Notice a thread, a theme. That is your conditioning. Okay. How are we doing so far? That was just number 1. We got 3 more. Okay. Number 2. That's 4. Number 2. Notice the intensity of the reaction you have to the thoughts. Remember, the more identified you are with your mind, the more intense the reaction will be. Notice the intensity of reaction to the thoughts. I've said this before, but I'll say it again. Any sense of self that is easily threatened is not your true self. If you feel threatened by the thoughts or the idea of something happening, the part of you that feels threatened is not your true self. That's the mind. That's the ego. That is fully fused and identified with the thought, so it believes it, and it believes its sense of self is rooted in what you're thinking. If you notice yourself feeling so easily threatened, intense reaction to the thoughts or the idea of something happening, boom, that is not your true self, because your true self is not that. It's not shaken like that. It's not pulled left and right. That's the mind, because the mind, and if we have our sense of identity with the mind is going all over the place, thinking of all these things. So if our sense of self is in our mind, we're going to be pulled in with it. But our identity is not our mind. Okay? So notice the intensity of reaction you have to the thoughts. Number 3, third step, in beginning to disidentify from the mind and break free is to switch the roles. Okay? If the thoughts have been thinking you, if the thoughts have been feeling like they are in control and you are at their mercy, we're going to switch the roles. Instead of the mind using you, we're going to switch roles and we're going to watch it diligently. Because right now we're like, oh, we're at its mercy. Oh no. Right now we're going to switch roles and we're going to watch it. So we're going to try this for a second. I want you to sit for a moment, get comfy, and we're going to try this. Try this statement on. I wonder what my next thought will be. 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 Notice what's happening. We've switched roles. We're no longer at the mercy of the thoughts in this moment. We are watching it, like a cat watching a mouse hole. Huh. I wonder when that little mouse is going to come out. I wonder what it's going to say. I'm now the watcher of the thoughts. I am not the thoughts. In that moment, we just disidentified. I'm not the thoughts. I am now the watcher of the thoughts, which means I am something more spacious, more expansive, outside of the thoughts. And I now watch the thoughts like I'm watching kids on a playground, being rambunctious, being silly. I wonder what my next thought will be. Elle says, boom, our identity is not our mind, so easily to feel like you are your thoughts. Yeah. And when we say, I wonder what my next thought will be, we've just stepped outside of it. We become the watcher. We've stepped into our power, our true identity as the witness, as the space in which all of this stuff happens, as the sky through which the clouds and the weather pass through. The sky is not easily shaken. The sky is not easily changed. You cannot take down the sky. When we say, I wonder what my next thought will be, we become sky and we watch the clouds that pass by. But when we believe that we're the clouds and we're the weather, we're going to be in a storm and then we're going to, it's constantly changing. Oh my God. And we're like, I am something beyond my thoughts. I am the backdrop. I am the constant. I am life itself. And therefore, I am not easily shaken by thoughts that come through my mind, because that's not me. So I wonder what my next thought will be. Let's play a fun game. Woo! That's a little gnat there. That's going to shift some things seriously. Watching this tonight is very much needed after a week of relapsing into rumination. Yes, this is definitely going to help shift your perspective around rumination, the constant need to think. Okay, so we switched the roles. Fourth thing to begin disidentifying from the mind is to practice being present without a story or a meaning to everything. If you didn't have the ability to think, how would you experience life? If you didn't have the ability to think, this is a thought, this is an experiment. If you didn't have the ability to think and make meaning, and analyze and make stories and make judgments and put labels, how would you experience life? If you're with me live, let's just brainstorm. If you didn't have the ability to think and analyze and make judgments and stories and labels, how would you experience life? Can rumination be asking myself the same questions over and over? Yeah. And again, it's not really about like the label of what's happening. It's the fact that there's all this mind activity that you're pulled into, that you're identified with. Okay, so I'm gonna ask that question again. If you didn't have the ability to think, how would you experience life? So much more happiness and joy. So one way to practice being present without a story or a meaning or a judgment to everything is to simply experience through your senses. When you step outside, sometimes we go, oh, tree. Oh, yeah, that reminds me. One time I had it when I was a kid. I was a tree, and I used to the tree house and the swings and the tree then like becomes something else, or we find our mind wandering because now we're thinking about the tree, which made us think about something else. And oh my gosh, all these trees are getting cut down, and oh, the world is whoa! The mind went somewhere else. If you didn't have the ability to think, how would you experience that tree? And you see it? See its color, see its texture, see the movement. Would you smell it? Could you feel it, touch it? Yeah. Taste it, maybe? We practice being present without a story by simply experiencing through the senses. When you have an uncomfortable emotion, what often happens is the mind takes that, makes meaning, makes a story, and now we're somewhere else. Can you just experience through the senses that emotion? Oh, I feel tightness in my chest. There's no story. There's no meaning to that. It just is. That's the isness of what you're experiencing. Oh, and I notice this here. Oh, okay. Can I just be with that? Can I just sense that? Can I just experience that without a story or a meaning? How would that change things? How would that change things? When you're kissing your partner and you don't feel fireworks and sparks, and the mind usually takes that and runs with it and creates a story. What if you could just experience the isness of that? Just through your senses. Just take in that kiss through your senses without a story, without, oh, what does this mean that I don't feel this? I should be feeling this. What do you actually feel in that moment? Oh, the sensory tactile of lips on lips. Oh, warmth. Ah. How would you experience life if you didn't have the ability to think? Try that on. Experiment with that. Play with that. Practice that. Because then you can see, I can be in my life without the compulsive thinking. I can experience life without needing to make a story. Life still goes on, whether I put a story on everything or not, whether I figure everything else out or not. Life still happens. Life happens. We no longer put a meaning and a story and a problem on everything. Life gets to happen. And we get to experience life in a deeper dimension. So I'm going to go over those 4 steps again. How do we begin to disidentify from the mind and not be pulled into the constant meaning making? 1, notice the conditioning by paying attention to any repetitive thought patterns. 2, notice the intensity of your reaction that you have to your thoughts. Any sense of identity that is that easily threatened is not your true self. Number 3, switch the roles. Instead of your mind using you, watch your mind. Step out and say, I wonder what my next thought will be. You just stepped out of the thoughts. Number 4, practice being present without a story or meaning to everything. Simply experience through the senses. How would I experience this moment without thoughts? Elle said, after your suggestion to read The Power of Now, it helped me tremendously, but I've struggled to put into practice being the watcher. This puts into perspective and explains how to disidentify from their mind. Thank you. You're welcome. And it takes practice. It takes practice. At first, maybe, Eckhart Tolle in this book, The Power of Now, he says, maybe it's just for a moment. You have just a little gap. At first, the gaps in the constant thinking are going to be very small because the identity with the mind is so fused and so strong. But the more you practice, the wider and wider that gap becomes. And the less and less you even feel the need to put meaning on things. You just want to experience them as they are in the present moment, not through the conditioning of the past and the culture or what this means about the future. I experience each moment, moment to moment, as it unfolds without a story, without problematic meaning. Life opens up. Then your sense of self no longer depends on the stories and the thoughts because you've learned how to experience life without it. And I imagine, as someone mentioned before, you probably start to experience more happiness and joy and fulfillment and contentment because you're not constantly in the problems that the mind creates. You begin to see that you can still live life without the needing to make meaning and story and analyze and ruminate, or without listening and reacting to every single thought. There is a you that is beyond your thinking. That realization alone is life-changing. These thoughts don't have to mean anything. They're just a regurgitation of my conditioning. Watch your conditioning. What is it? Where did you learn it? What's the intensity of reaction you have to this? Switch the roles. Watch the thoughts. I wonder what my next thought's going to be. And practice being present without making stories or meanings. So just experience through your senses, through your body. Okay? Whoo! Damn. Okay, I'm gonna give myself a pat on the back. That was a good one. Okay, so if you want to go deeper, if you want more tools and practices in support in disidentifying from your mind, because guess what? The pull of the mind is very strong. It has a lot of momentum. It's very convincing because it wants to keep establishing its sense of importance. So if you want to go deeper, if you need more support and practices in disidentifying from the mind, then I want to let you know that our Safety Within course until tonight at midnight is 20% off. So this course is filled with body-based experiential practices to help you begin to dismantle the fear, to dismantle the constant being up in your mind. Instead of trying to solve it all through your mind, we drop into the body and just experience and feel without the story, without the meaning. It's life-changing. So I've posted the link to that. Use the code Happy Birthday, all caps, one word, at checkout. You get 20% off until tonight. This is Wednesday, August 25th at midnight. This month is Healing Embodied's second birthday, so I'm just offering lots of special things for everyone who has supported us and who has learned from our content. I just wanted to offer something special each week this month, and today is the last day to get 20% off the Safety Within course. So check that out if you're wanting more tools, more experiential ways to begin to disidentify from your mind so that you are no longer swept away in the constant meaning-making, judgments, rumination, and overthinking. All right, everybody, thank you so much for being here. I hope this was incredibly illuminating. I know that when I learned this stuff when I was in the midst of relationship anxiety, it was a game changer because before this awakening, I believed every single thing that I thought, and it would just take me somewhere else. And I couldn't see reality as reality. I saw reality as through the lens of my mind. So, sending you all so much love. Oh my gosh, that was 50 minutes. I'm going to head out now. And until next time, I can't wait to see you embrace love wholeheartedly. Bye for now.